finally, let's take a look at the zones game, the last game. And I used the same template on this game as I did on the last one. Multi-row ordering, because I've got these 3 zones, 1, 2, and 3, and I'm not just putting things in order, I'm putting things in groups as well. So I've got myself 3 rows, a row for the housing, a row for the industrial, and a row for the retail. And then the thing that was really tough about this game for me was that you just had this obstinately unfixed number of elements. You could have up to 3 housing subzones. You could have up to 3 industrial, up to 3 retail. And then the rules were just shitty too. I mean, some of them were okay. You can't have any housing and industrial. Cool, that made sense. No problem. I can't have... And you notice how it looks like my diagram. I'm not going to have H and I together in the same column. But then the other ones, you can't have H with more than 1 R. So I'm going to say you can't have H with 2 or more R's. And you can't have industrial with 3 retails, so you can't have industrial with 3 retails. And you can't have all 3 housing together. That one was the other straightforward rule. Alright, let's dive into this. We've got our rules, we've got our template, we've got a global accounting question, and we knew that you cannot have any housing and industrial together, right? But in answer choice B, you've got housing and industrial. Get rid of answer choice B. You know that you can't have housing with 2 or more retails. But in answer choice A, you have housing with 2 retails. Get rid of answer choice A. You know that you can't have... Oh, I left out a rule. You know that from the first rule, you can't have retail in zone 1. Pardon me. No retail in zone 1. And yet in answer choice C, you've got retail in zone 1. Get rid of answer choice C. And finally, you can't have all 3 housing subzones together, but in answer choice D, they are 3 together in zone 2. Get rid of answer choice D. And that leaves us with only answer choice E, and we'll go ahead and plug that information into our diagram. This answer then making it very clear that while we might have 3 of anything, like 3 retail, we don't have to have 3 of everything. I've only got 2 industrial, I've only got 2 housing, and they're both together. Alright, let's take a look at the directive questions. How about question... I could do 21, but it doesn't give me very specific direction. I'm going to start with 22 just because it looks easier. If you've got 1 sub in each of the zones designated for industrial, then what's allowed? And you see, this gives me more specific direction. It gives me something I can work with. 1 sub in each of them is industrial. Well, if that's true, there's never any retail in zone 1, and now there's not any housing at all. So no housing, no housing, no housing, and finally, if you've got industrial, then you don't have 3 retail. So I may have retail, I may have 2 retail, but I don't have 3 retail. Answer choice A, what could be true, more subs or retail in 2 than in 3. Sure, why not? 2 retails here and only 1 there. Let's get rid of these other answer choices. A sub in one of the zones is designated for housing. No, there's no housing. Exactly 2 subs are in zone 1. No, there's just the 1 industrial. Exactly 3 subs are in 2 and in 3. If you got 3 here, that would be I and then 2 R's. And if you got 3 here, I and 2 R's. But wait, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's too many R's. We only get 3. Answer choice E, exactly 4 subzones are in 3. If you're going to have 4 subzones here with 1 I, you'd have to have 3 R's, and we can't do 1 I with 3 R's. So you could have, what, more in 2 than in 3. You could have 2 R's here and only 1 there. That's allowed. 23 is also a little bit more directive than 21, so I'll do that next. If you've got 3 subs in all that are retail, so I'm going to use all 3 possible retails, and we've got a sub in 2 that's housing, what's allowed? And see, if that sub in 2 that's housing, that makes this a little bit more directive. So, I've got housing in 2. Never have retail in 1. If I've got housing, I've got no industrial. If I've got housing, I do not have more than one retail. So that means one retail. And based on the question, I'm using all three retails. So that means I've got two more retails here. All right. Which of the following is allowed? On this basis, what do we know? A, 2 subs in Zone 1 are designated for housing. Can't see why not. Answer choice B, on the other hand, more zones industrial in 2 than in 3. No, there's no industrial in 2. More zones are in retail in 2 than in 3. No, there's more retail in 3. The same number of zones are retail in 2 and 3. No, there's more retail in 3. E, a zone in 3 is designated for housing. Why can't that happen? Oh! Because if you've got housing, you've only got one retail. Here we've got 2 retails, so no housing. And that leaves us then with only answer choice A. We might have 2 zones in 1 for housing. Sure, that's a possibility. We knew it. It works. Helps to get rid of the others, maybe. All right, our last directive question, which was a little bit less specifically directive. If 3 subzones are designated for each use, then what is allowed? So now I've got 3 R's, I've got 3 I's, I've got 3 H's. Let's take a look at what we can do. A, exactly 1 zone in 3 is industrial, and exactly 1 zone in 3 is retail. Can I do that? All right, let's see. 1 industrial and 1 retail. Well, if we've got 1 industrial, that means we've got no housing. We never have retail here. And the question said we're using 3 of each kind. So I've got 3 R's. That's my most limited. 1 of them here, 2 of them here. If I've got 2 of them here, I had a rule about that. You can't have any housing, because if you got housing, you've only got 1 retail. So no housing. Uh-oh. This is where my problem comes in. I had to have from the question 3 of each, but I have no housing here, I have no housing here, and I can't put 3 houses together, which means I can't do answer choice A. Fair enough. What about answer choice B? Exactly 2 zones in 2 are designated for housing. Let's see. Can I do 2 houses in 2? Alright, no retail ever in 1. When I do have housing, I have no industrial. When I do have housing, I have no more than 1 retail. So let's just go ahead and say I've got a retail here. Now I've got to have 3 retails altogether, so I'll put my other 2 here. I'm just trying to see if this can work. I've got to have 3 industrial, and the only rule I had about industrial is you can't have industrial with all 3 retail. So, I mean, I could have industrials with 2 retails, right? If I've got industrial, that's no housing. So there's my 3 retails, there's my 3 industrial, and let's put a housing there, and there's my 3 housings. Doesn't break any rules. I can have 2 subzones in 2 designated for housing. Huzzah! Alright, those are our directive questions. Let's take those non-directive blanket questions. Now, how about 19? Which of the following cannot be true within a single zone? So 4 of these things can be true. And I want to use my prior work to knock out some things that I've already seen happen. A, 2 zones are designated, 1 housing and 1 retail. What? Yeah, that can happen. Check it off. B, 2 zones are designated, 1 industrial and 1 retail. Yeah, that can happen. Check it off. C, 3 zones are designated and all 3 are retail. I can't see why I couldn't do that right here. You know, I don't know. Right, I don't see any reason I couldn't just move it over. I'll move past it. D, 4 subzones are designated and none of them are industrial. None of them are industrial. 4 zones and they're all H and R? But I got rules. If you got H, you do not have more than 1 R. So now at most we've got 1 R To get 4 zones, we would then need 3 H's, but I can't have 3 H's together. If I've got 4 subzones, I can't have them be H and R. There's no way to get to 4. That can't work, so that's my answer. That leaves us with only question 20, the maximum number of subzones allowed in 3. Well, this is how I'm going to work this. I'm going to use my prior work as a baseline and see how I could move up from there. The maximum in 3. Here I've got 2, here I've got 3, here I've got 2, here I've got 5. Alright, so the maximum is at least 5 subzones in 3. How can I get more than that? And see, by starting with this baseline, I allow myself to think very systematically about it. To get more than 5, I would have to add an H or an R, right? But if I add an H at all, I'm going to lose all of my industrial. So while I might get back up to 5, I'm not going to get more than 5 because I'm going to lose these industrials. So adding H doesn't help me. There's no I's I can add. How about if I add an R? Oh, wait, I can't add an R because if you've got industrial, you don't have 3 retails. So this permutation with these 5, that's the biggest number I can get in zone 3, and I can see that because I can think very mathematically and methodically about it. I can't add any H's, I can't add any I's, I can't add any R's, I can't add anything. 5 is the maximum, and that concludes this question. And that concludes this game, and that concludes this section. I hope you had as much fun with it as I did.